started up pretty fast. Yes, friends, if you're still hearing some background hiss and noise, um, I've done everything with the equipment that I have to try to make this audio sound good for you. Thanks to the generosity of my patrons on Patreon, um, all of you, Jay, John, Reginald, Christopher, amazing, amazing support. Um, I'm ordering a little audio interface to USB, um, little Focusrite unit, um, and hopefully that will finally put an end to this noise I can't seem to get rid of. So, enough on business. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Welcome you all here. Um, I made a commitment to read through and discuss with you all of the sutras, and then all of the Gosho, which is quite voluminous. But there's a lot of tremendous information in it, and it's also information that can launch your searches independently on certain concepts, terminologies, etc., which will take you to many other sutras and so on. But I'd like to intersperse. I started last year, I think, or maybe early this year. I started doing something I call walking meditation. It's a whole playlist. Um, and they're just random subjects that I pick up either from your comments or emails, questions that you have that make me think, oh, yeah, I really should talk about that. Or I'll just be up in the middle of the night editing or doing stuff, and I'll hit a term that I hear all the time, but for some reason it catches my attention, and I think, yeah, I should elucidate or talk about that, open that concept up for discussion, so on and so forth. So that's what the Walking Meditations playlist is about. And I try to put all these random questions, everything about ego and time, and got something going on in my eye. No, that won't be a subject. But so look through there if you're tired of hearing Gosho or Lotus Sutra or whatever it is. And I put them on my podcast as well. Try to break it up, you know. But the fundamentals, they're good to know. And I remember in my early years of practice, um, I enjoyed doing more independent study, just running off on my own, going up to Santa Barbara, their religious studies department, and looking things up, challenging what I was being told by certain groups and organizations. I wanted to know for myself, and and this is what the Buddha taught. So I was inspired to do that. I was more inspired to do that than I was to slog through the Gosho and the sutras without really having a depth of understanding what it was I was reading. And that, in short, really motivated me to start this whole series of events and develop my channel. And I've expanded with Patreon and Cocoscope and other things, tried to do things on my website, etc. And I've settled into these videos. And now adding podcasts, um, just trying to make information available, get the dialogue going, keep it going, if you will. So I think it helps all of us. It certainly helps me. And the more you watch, the more you show me your participation. I say all of this because the comments are essential for me to get inspired to do some kind of a talk on something not completely but outside the formalism of Buddhism. Do you understand? Something relatable about concepts in Buddhism or that have Buddhist application, um, and that aren't necessarily covered in these ancient documents, right? Something contemporary, something fresh. So I rely on you guys, and my own inspirations from time to time, but you guys helps immensely with that. So give me ideas. Email me, tlksylvain@gmail.com, or comment on these videos. Um, ask me about something you want a deeper dive on, like the Gongyo meditations, some call prayers. Um, John Kellogg asked me about that, and he was struggling with one particular one, and I thought, gosh, I've been wanting to do a talk on all those for a long time, and I may do more. So, and that's another thing. If you see a topic uh, discussed, I've been doing this over 40 years, so there may be stuff up on my YouTube channel. It's been up there for more than a decade or longer. Anyway, um, with practice, just like you, I practice, my perception grows deeper, more profound, and my life changes. So I apply what I know differently. So if you see something I did 10 years ago about, ego or something, and you're wanting to say, well, you didn't quite cover what I'm experiencing, or you have a specific aspect you want to discuss, great. Let me hunker down and get to study and do some reference work and make a new one that with a more fresh outlook, a more developed outlook, if you will, from my practice. So yeah, it's all good. Let's just keep talking about what we're doing, what we're practicing. That's what the Sangha means. That's how we keep it fresh. That's what motivates us to continue to practice, right? So, all of that is to two things. Uh, Immense thanks for all of you who support, either watching or financially, whether they're one-time donations or they're subscriptions on Patreon. Whatever you can do, it helps me make these things better, at least equipment-wise. I don't know what I can do about myself other than the continued practice. uh, um, and watch and like and do all of those YouTube things, because those do help, even though I've been demonetized. I don't know how to get around that. I may, if you guys have suggestions on that, maybe there's some kind of campaign we can launch so that YouTube can stop being so stingy and scared. But not going to let any of that get in the way of getting this information out there. So with all that said, or as I've been quoted before by you guys, blah, 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 we're going to start into my third volume of Nichiren's Go Show. And right off the bat, the several Go Shows that start this book off are pretty meaty. These are more on the line of, we've talked before about Go Shows that are personal letters, advice, support, thanks. And then there are some which are written specifically to those inner circle of Nichiren's teaching circle, his disciples, if you will, that are very doctrinal treatises, if you will, about the goings on in the nation and how they reflect the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And then there are other Go Shows that are teaching Go Shows that are meant for those individuals as well as a broader students that are either ordained monks or just lay monks amongst the people who take on the responsibility of teaching others. They may have in their village, they may have all the people in the village come to see them to hear Nichiren's thoughts and teachings. So there's those kinds of Go Shows too that are said, no, we need to talk about this and explore this in Buddhism as it relates to you and your neighborhood and so on. And so what we're going to read in these first few Go Shows, and I don't know how to Shijo King. Yeah, there's a lot of big time devotee of the Lotus Sutra will meet persecution. So there's a variety of treatises and teachings and a lot of inner circle dialogue in this book. And we're going to hit the ground running with, look at the length of the title on this one. It looks like a paragraph. The object of devotion for observing the mind established in the fifth 500-year period after the dust come one's passing. So this is going to be, by the title, about Gohonzon. And one thing that I've corrected in the past, and because it's in the title of this one, I'm going to address it briefly. if I know how to do brief. Uh, the object of devotion is often interpreted in the West, and even that word is an interpretation of a thing, a solid thing, a statue, a piece of paper, a scroll, uh, that thing behind me, the Gohanzan. Um, but that's not what's meant. The object of devotion for observing the mind, established in the fifth 500 years of his time. So it's really more, if you want to keep the word object, it should kind of say objective of devotion, of observing for observing the mind. It's really a verb. And maybe that'll help you understand more what is meant when you see many times in these translations, object of devotion. Think of it as objective of devotion, but a specific collection of objective of devotion for observing the mind. Because Buddhism sees the mind as something unphysical, unrelated to the karmic color of your skin, the consciousness of your eye, the senses of your nose, mouth, feeling, touch. Those things you can say are objects, but you see how even in the translation, this is avoided. Because the mind in Buddhism is something that exists without these physical attributes. That is uniquely your connection to perception of the world, the universe, life, the process of life. But it's not all that the self is, it's more. And that's why the idea that the Buddha nature, the Buddha mind, has always been there, is always is this very experience. But that we narrow it into this vessel in our human mind, and still it's so amorphous and never static, moment to moment, evolving and changing, 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, that it's not a physical attribute. It's a mental attribute. What usually in the West is slides into spiritual, but I resist using that word only because that allows for this big open gate of religionist magical thinking to slide in, and that's not Buddhism. Okay. All right, so part one, I know this is going to be put in parts. There's no way I get through this in one sitting. Okay. Authored by Nichiren, the Shramana of Japan. Volume 5, this is Nichiren starting now. Volume 5 of the Great Concentration and Insight States. You know that's a writing of Tyndale's, right? Quote, life at each moment is endowed with the 10 worlds. At the same time, each of the 10 worlds is endowed with all 10 worlds, right? We know that the interrelationship of the 10 worlds. So you can be in the bodhisattva of hell, or the hunger of quietude or humanity, or the anger of learning. We transmigrate through these 10 worlds constantly. And this is why it multiplies out to 100 and so on, up to 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. Our minds are constantly flying around through not only thoughts and experiences, thoughts based on those experiences, but all the attendant samsaric components, the 10 factors that make up this life thing that we are in samsara, right? so that an entity of life actually possesses 100 worlds. Each of these worlds in turn possesses 30 realms, which means that in the 100 worlds there are 3,000 realms. The 3,000 realms of existence are all possessed by life in a single moment. Now, John, listen to this, because this is about self-manifestation. A lot of students of Buddhism have trouble with this idea. What is self-manifestation? 3,000 realms in existence are all possessed by life in a single moment. If there is no life, that is the end of the matter. But if there is the slightest bit of life, it contains all the 3,000 realms. This is what is meant when we speak of the region of the unfathomable. Nichiren is telling you it's hard to understand the full implication of what that means. Note, the 3,000 realms might also read 3,000 factors, but the number is the same. The only difference lies in the method of expansion or calculation, if you will. Another copy of the Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, each world is endowed with the three realms of existence. Question. Here we go, the old question and answer method. Is the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life explained in the profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra? Answer. Miao Lo states that it is not. Question. Then is it explained in the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra? Another publication. Answer. Miao Lo states that it is not. Miao Lo is a great bodhisattva from China, in case you're not familiar. Question. What are his exact words? That's the reference to Shakyamuni. Answer. He says, quote, it's Miao Lo. What are his exact? He says, none of them reveal that a single moment of life contains the 3,000 realms. So he actually said this. Question. Is this principle mentioned in any of the 4 volumes of the Great Concentration and Insight? Answer. No, it is not. Okay, we're confused. Question. What proof is there of this? Answer. Miao Lo says, quote, when at last he revealed the method of meditation in Great Concentration and Insight, he at the same time employed the 3,000 realms as a way to understand. He's talking about Tendai now. I should probably just read it up, make it more confusing. Question. Volume 2 of Profound Meaning states, quote, each of the 10 worlds contains the other 9. And in those 100 worlds are 1,000 factors. Volume 1 of Words and Phrases states, quote, each sense field is endowed with the 10 worlds, each of which, again, is endowed with all of the 10 within itself. Since each of those 100 worlds is endowed with the 10 factors, the total becomes 1,000. The profound meaning of the perceiver of the world's sounds, chapter 7 comments, quote, the 10 worlds are all mutually inclusive, thus making 100 worlds. 1,000 factors are inherent in life. Even though these are not visible, life by its nature possesses all of them, end quote. Isn't the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life mentioned in the first 4 volumes of Great Concentration and Insight? Answer. Miao Lo says that it is not. Question. What does he say exactly? Answer. Volume 5 of the Annotations on the Great Concentration and Insight, that's Miao Lo's writing, reads, in comparison with the chapter on correct meditation, the preceding chapters fall short of describing the practice in its entirety. but they do contain the 25 preparatory exercises that lead to understanding, and thus they provide the expedient means to the correct practice. The first 6 chapters, then, are all meant to bring about understanding. Quote. Also, in the same volume, he says, when at last he revealed the method of meditation in great concentration and insight, he at the same time employed the 3,000 realms as a way to understand. This principle is the ultimate revelation of his final and supreme teaching. That is why Chang'an states, states in his introduction to Great Concentration and Insight. Great Concentration and Insight reveals the teaching that Tendai Chiche himself practiced in the depths of his being. Quote, he had good reason for saying this. I hope that those who read this work and seek to understand it will not allow their minds to be distracted by anything else. End quote. Tendai Chiche propagated his teachings for 30 years. During the first 29 years, expounding the doctrines contained in Profound Meaning, Words and Phrases, and other works, he explained the 5 periods and the 8 teachings, as well as the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors. He not only refuted the erroneous doctrines of the preceding more than 500 years, but also clarified matters that had not been fully explained by the Buddhist scholars of India. The great teacher Chang'an states, quote, even the great scholars of India were not in a class with him. And the Chinese teachers, well, one need hardly mention them. This is no idle boast. The doctrine he taught was indeed of such excellence. End quote. How pitiful that Tendai's successors allowed those thieves, the founders of the Flower Garland and True Word schools, to steal the priceless gem of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, and then ironically became their followers. The great teacher Chang'an was fully aware this would happen when he remarked in sorrow, quote, if this teaching should be lost, it would be a tragedy for the future. Nichiren can't help expressing his ire at his surrounding scholars. Question. What is the difference between the principle of the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors and that of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life? Good question. Answer. The former concerns only sentient beings, but the latter applies to both sentient and insentient beings. That's one we're going to get into. Question. If insentient beings are endowed with the 10 factors, is it correct to assume that plants and trees have minds and can attain Buddhahood like sentient beings? Answer. This is a matter that is difficult to believe and difficult to understand. Tendai defined 2 points that are, quote, difficult to believe and difficult to understand, end quote. One lies in the realm of doctrinal teachings, and the other in the realm of meditative practice. With regard to the former, in the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra, we read that persons of the 2 vehicles, and ichantikas, people of incorrigible disbelief, or persons of incorrigible disbelief, are forever barred from attaining Buddhahood, and that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of the teachings, attained enlightenment for the first time in this world, as Siddhartha. Nevertheless, we find that the theoretical and the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra repudiate both these statements. One Buddha who says 2 things as opposite as fire and water, who could believe him? This is the point that is difficult to believe and difficult to understand. in the realm of doctrinal teachings. The point that is, quote, difficult to believe and difficult to understand, quote, in the realm of meditative practice, concerns the principles of the 100 worlds and the 1,000 factors, and that of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, which explains that even insentient beings are endowed with the 10 factors of life, and that they are endowed with both material and spiritual aspects. There's that spiritual word again. Now you understand when it's used here as a translation, we're talking about mental processes. That's what Buddhism is about. So the way we think, what motivates the way we think. And if you'll recall videos that I've done on the 3,000 realms and interchangeably called it the origins of life, the energies that I talk about, from quiescent to inertia, those are common to everything we experience, including the Big Bang, the universe, all these different verbiage we can put around this life experience. So in that way, we are discussing insentient as well as sentient beings. The hairs on your arms, are they insentient or are they sentient? They are part of you. Are you insentient? How much of you is sentient and how much of you is... You see how doctrinal versus meditative... The reason he separates this is because when we're meditating, we are using our samsaric experience to transcend it to our core, our inherent Buddha nature. So we're traveling through that very idea. That's different than reading about it and understanding it logistically. Even these videos that I make are a border crossing of sorts, but they're doctrinal. I'm just trying to make them more experiential, which is meditation, right? This is why I prefer the term silent meditations in Gongyo, because even though we're reading words, they're meant as triggers to our experience, our insights, our path to Buddhahood. All right, on with Nichiren. Both the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist scriptures permit wooden or painted images to be used as objects of devotion, but Tendai and his followers were the first to explain the principles behind this practice. If a piece of wood or paper lacked the cause and effect of Buddhahood, in either the material or the spiritual aspect, it would be futile to rely on it as an object of devotion. Here's this transmutation thing happening. Why I'm always talking about the Gohonzon not being a piece of paper with writing on it. It may in fact be that in samsara, in this world, but as an object, an objective, as a mirror to our own Buddha nature. Remember Nichiren said, never seek this Gohonzon outside yourself. How does he say that when he created this thing? Because the thing isn't it. The thing is in you. The thing is your Buddha mind, your Buddha nature. This is just a tool to help enliven your invocation of it. Right? It's a perfect tool. When you look at vacation pictures from 20 years ago, if you're old enough, you, for a moment, when you see that picture of Yosemite or a bear or a rock, it immediately brings forth the experiences of that adventure. But it's an imperfect object because it's very specific to you alone. You can show it to others and it'll elicit some recognition. They've had experiences of a rock, but it won't elicit your experience of it. the smell of the air, the temperature in the air, the sound of the stream not far away, so on and so forth, right? The fact that it happened that day that you first fed a wild doe, all of that's yours. This, Gohanzen, is universal because it represents all of the Buddhist scholarship and teachings, and even outside of Buddhism. But tools used as expedient means in Buddhism to incite your path to your Buddha way, your Buddha mind, your Buddha-ness. So in that way, it's universal. Follow? All right. So let's see, where are we? Okay, we've got some time. Question: what authority do you have for stating that a plant, a tree, or a land manifests cause and effect, or the 10 worlds? There's some struggling going on here. Answer: Volume 5 of Great Concentration and Insight says, quote, the realm of the environment is also has the 10 factors. Thus, an evil land has appearance, nature, entity, power, and so on. 10 factors that we chant in Gongo, right? Volume 6 of the Annotations on the Profound Meaning of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, appearance exists only in what is material. Nature exists only in what is spiritual or experience. Entity, power, influence, and relation in principle combine both the material and the spiritual. Internal cause and latent effect are purely spiritual, experienced in the mind. Manifest effect exists only in what is material. So he's taken apart the 10 factors here for you to show how they relate to your samsaric experience, physical versus mental. The diamond scalpel states, a plant, a tree, a pebble, a speck of dust, each has the Buddha nature. And each is endowed with cause and effect, and with the function to manifest and with wisdom to realize its Buddha nature. I think that's a biggie. So I'm going to pause on that one. But I want to talk about it for a minute. If you can begin to wrap your mind around the idea that everything we experience in this universe came from the same pool of energy. If you can somehow build an equation in your mind like Maxwell did, or like Einstein did, E, energy, equals matter times a speed, a time component. Maxwell, E equals, I wish I knew that formula better. It's a simple formula, but I always forget it. It's about electromagnetism, which is itself a description of energy. So when these energies combine, and think on the subatomic level, because those energies combine to create things with energy, positive or negative energy, electrons, protons, neutrons, right? And they create molecules. And now as we move from energies towards something we like to call matter, maybe because it matters to us, samsara after all, there's a very distinct, very analyzed and immediate path from energy to fingernails. That same path is traveled by the trees outside, by the wood that made this house, by the chipmunk and the bear. They're all manifestations of that same energy. Buddha is that energy, because that energy, before it starts to combine into thingness, suchness, is completely devoid of attachment. It's when the attachments in that energy start that samsara begins. I know that may sound a little cloudy right now, but that's what they're talking about. That's what Nichiren and Tendai and Mialo and Dengyo and all of these great scholars and bodhisattvas was trying to wrap their mind around and figure out, how do I use words to illustrate that? And the irony, the supreme irony of that is that they're trying to describe something that you and I and everything around us is experiencing at this very moment, which is what it means to say enlightenment is now. It's this life itself. You got to get all this other stuff out of the way. Stop being preoccupied with what color it is. It's just look at how it is how something is right? I mean, the word being is take that word apart. Like I just made up. How is ising, right? What is being? Because as soon as you try to define being, you're not it. It doesn't be anymore. Time, right? The moment we observe that, it is no longer that. It is the history of that and an experience we think we had, and we all heard it differently, and it is not here anymore. Time is very tricky. So how do you illustrate that doctrinally, and then meditatively? In other words, how do you experience that? Ultimately, the answer is having conviction that you will see that is what leads you to it, because it's the only thing that gets you through the snow to the place where the warm cocoa is, to warm yourself up. If you didn't know there was warm cocoa in that building down the road, the blizzard might just stop you in your tracks. And you just freeze, you'd stop being. Your being is in the inertia, the motive force, the chi that you put forth along with your motivation to move it. Right? This is the samsaric slog. And this method of Buddhism is the way to release yourself from it, even for just a moment, and to try to stay in that place. What an amazing world this would be, right? So we'll continue. I told you, book 3, these Gosho are no easy matter. They're very profound thoughts. So comments. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much for listening. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Have a great day.